There's a fancy Greek word, Perusia. Let's all say that together. Perusia. Last week it was Habakkuk. This week it's Perusia. Perusia is the day of the Lord. Some people equate it with this thing I wrote about this week, the rapture. Let me just say a little aside about the rapture. Anybody grow up hearing about the rapture like I did? Yeah, want to admit to it? Yeah. Roman Catholics don't talk about that so much if you grow up Roman Catholic. Baptists, oh yeah. And the thing about the rapture is we see it in the movies. Did anybody watch the HBO movie The Leftovers?
Oh, yeah. It's a series.
Really good and disturbing. But in it, the rapture happens and 20% or 12% of humanity just vanishes. And it's very disturbing for the people that are left because they got to wonder what was wrong with me that I didn't get to go. And when I was a little kid, I was terrified of the rapture. I was. I got a Bible comic. Another tip. Parents, don't ever let your kid read a Bible comic about the book of Revelation. It's terrifying. So I read this Bible comic about the book of Revelation, and it was a very literalistic view of the rapture. And it basically said, quotes Jesus here in Luke. It says, you might go to bed one night and wake up and everyone else in the house is just gone. The thinking was, the good people would be zapped up by God to be spared the tribulation, the really, really bad times, as if now isn't bad enough. I mean, imagine if you were living through like the days of the bubonic plague, or even COVID kind of felt this way sometimes, or you were living through, you were living in Gaza right now, or you're living in other war-torn places down in Africa, and places in America that are in our country that are being burned up right now. I mean, it would kind of seem like the bad times were here already, right? That's not what the rapture is. It's not. The rapture is not even a biblical concept. It's nothing that's in the Bible, really. It's not what Jesus is talking about today, for sure. See, the Pharisees have come to him and said, and his disciples talked to him about this too. When will God's glory appear? When will the majesty of God appear? When will the kingdom of God happen? As Jesus has been saying, the kingdom of God is nigh. John 2. The kingdom of God is nigh. So if you walk around saying something is about to come, then people are going to naturally want to know, well, when is it going to happen, God? Right? And Jesus does not give them a date. Within Christianity, there's been a lot of movements, including the Jehovah's Witnesses and others, that really were based on there being a date for when Jesus and when God was going to come back. You remember seeing posters and things that said, Jesus is coming back May 21st, and then Jesus doesn't come back May 21st. And the people who said he was coming back May 21st go, well, we mean May 21st next year. There's a whole movement that's infiltrated our government called the Seven Mountains Movement that says, well, once we get our country to be theocratic enough, Jesus will come back and rule it. Subject for another sermon, but disturbing enough. And really, what everyone is worried about, the problem that they're having, isn't about theology. It's not about the day of the Lord. It's not about the Bible. It's about time. They're all anxious about something that's going to happen over time. They're all anxious about when something's going to happen. Imagine if you're living in the Roman occupation. You want to know. I think he was looking for St. Mark's Catholic next door. But if you're living under the Roman occupation, you want to know, well, when, Jesus? When is all this going to end? When are we going to be done with all this? Jesus refuses to give them an answer because, as he said last week in our reading, the answer is right here in front of you. The answer is in me. The kingdom of God is contained here and within this. And this week, he finally kind of shuts him up by saying, well, when God enters into history, it's dramatic. It's a big deal. You're going to notice. And he does this teaching thing that Jesus does a lot. He says, it's kind of like, and today he says, it's kind of like someone going to sleep and then waking up and the person you're sleeping beside being gone. Someone working next to a woman and then she hears a noise, she turns and the woman's gone. It's sort of like when everyone left Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, it's the day of the Lord is going to be like that. When God enters into history, which God has already done, and God is going to continue to do, you're going to notice. And in fact, God's entered into history, so maybe you ought to notice right now. So Jesus is wrestling with a fundamental human preoccupation, a fundamental human obsession, a fundamental human problem, opportunity, a fundamental human tension, which is time. I love what C.S. Lewis says about time. He says, one of my favorite, he talks about time a lot because he also wrote science fiction novels. And he said that humans are amphibians. He said that we're half spirit, half animal. And that as spirits, we belong to the eternal, and as animals, we inhabit time. He said our preoccupation with it, our discomfort with it, comes because we kind of have one foot in both sides of time, in eternity and in the present. And time's kind of interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, I met from UCSB, who's actually a quantum physicist. If you ever get a quantum physicist at lunch or on the phone, get them to talk about time with you. And some fun facts about time that you may not have known. There's actually only 23 hours and 56 minutes in every day. And it's been proven that time, our perception of time, is based on what is going on with us neurologically. Some of us may have had something really terrible, like a car accident happen, or something else really stressful and traumatic, and time slows down, doesn't it? And that's a survival mechanism that's in our brains, so we can collect information we need in order to react. Stress really, one writer I read said, stress really causes a mini time warp to happen with us. And there's so many different calendars. There's a Jewish calendar. I can't remember what the year is on the Jewish calendar or the month, but in Nepal, on the Bikram Sankrit calendar, it's the year 2080. And that Nepal's also 15 minutes out of sync, out of any time zones. Ethiopia has a 13-month calendar. In Myanmar, it's the year 1384. I love again what C.S. Lewis says. He says the future is something to which everyone is going, but we're all going to reach it at the same speed of 60 minutes an hour. Time is something that we struggle with, and Jesus is trying to help them understand it. I understand you're anxious, but really, nothing you can do about it. And then when he throws in that nice quote about the vultures, there's a lot of different ways of taking that. The way I really interpret it is him saying, well, if you want to see time at work, go look where the vultures are, because that's where we're all headed someday, right? Look where the corpses are. We're all headed towards that eventuality in this life. And so, what's the answer? I wish I had the answer for our struggle with time. I really do. I wish you could walk out of here today and say, oh, wow, I listened to Tim talk for what I was hoping was going to be 10 minutes and was more like 15. And I feel so much better about time. I don't know that I'm going to be able to accomplish that today. But like so many things that we have to live with day in, day out, I don't think it's ever about conquering a challenge like this, a spiritual challenge. I think it's about changing our relationship to that challenge. I think it's about taking a different look at it. Maybe looking at it from a different angle, a different perspective, a different altitude. Because, time is really much more than we understand. Einstein said that if I'm on a planet and the gravity is different and the size of the planet is different and my mass is different, then time moves more quickly or more slowly for me. If I'm in a ship going light speed or faster than light speed, then time is moving much slower for me than it does for someone sitting on a planet. I guess. Time is much more than we understand. And still we obsess over it, and we're enslaved by it, aren't we? It dictates everything that we do. It dictates how long we spend on task, when we perceive that work is finished for the day. There's a story I read this week about a cannery that opened in Inuit country up in Canada, and up where what we like to call Eskimos, where the native indigenous people lived, and they thought it was hilarious when the strangers had a whistle that would go off, and they would always walk out of the factory and go home and say, "Okay, we're done working." And they said, "No, work is done when it's finished, or when you're just ready to stop." But we don't time ourselves. And I love this view of it, and what Jesus is kind of saying today. He's saying, well, look, stuff is going to happen. And when it does happen, you're going to know. And it's going to be like this, and it's going to be like that. But really, it comes down to, you've got to change your relationship to time. Because see, when we obsess over time, when we let it rule our life, then we lose our life, don't we? Do. How many people do you meet, and how many times have you said this, where someone says, "How's life?" And you'll say, "Oh, I'm so busy right now." Or, "Oh, we're crazy. It's all I do." We go straight to the fact that we have no time. What would it be like if when people ask us that, instead of going right to the response of, which is very natural, us being American and a part of this work ethic, the response that says, well, here's all this stuff I'm doing with all the time that God's given me. What if someone said like my friend Pepe said yesterday, you see around the neighborhood, you're sitting in a wheelchair next to the bus station. I walked over and said hello to him. I said, "How are you?" And he went, just like this. He said, "I get to be here with all this today." What would it be like if we were people who were able to respond to the addiction of time anxiety in a world that's addicted to time anxiety, and say, take that breath and say, "Well, I'm here with you right now." Think of how that could transform somebody's day. Think of how that could transform your present. Because see, Jesus says today, when we try to save our life, we'll lose it. We read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah a couple of weeks ago, and it occurred to me early this morning as I was thinking about this. Lot's wife is walking away from her home, and it's being destroyed. And what does she do? She turns back and looks at it, and she turns into a pillar of salt. It's just sort of a joke, because what does salt enable us to do? Take a nice piece of meat and preserve it for a long time. Preserve foods. Sterilize things. Help us to move beyond the scope of time. And so it's almost like the story was saying, well, you want to spend more time with that. You want to reflect on looking back. You want to act on this belief that maybe you could turn back. okay, well, I'll let you turn back as long as you want. In fact, you can help other people turn back from now on and just be salt. Kind of mean, but a really good, makes a really good point. You know, another alternative that I got today, and then I'm gonna stop talking, is reading this book about de-Westernizing spirituality. It's by a woman named Cindy Lee, who is a Chinese American theologian, and she says, you know, it's kind of interesting. How you perceive time and how you talk about time is really based on language and based on the language you were taught. Like in English, we perceive time as being in front of us or behind us, right? Well, that was way back when. I know I look forward to that. And I don't know if this is true, and if some of you actually speak Mandarin, maybe you can address this, but she said in Mandarin, time is a vertical thing. It's either above us or below us. And she said in other languages, like Greek, it's big or it's small. And so, you know, I hope that this helps us to start thinking about setting ourselves free from this in our everyday life. Because what Cindy Lee talks about is how within Eastern spirituality, time is circular. And that perhaps the spirituality that we can all learn is a circular spirituality. Now, if we really think about it, that's what we do here. Because we have this year that's color-coded. Right now we're in the season, little quiz. What season are we in right now? It's called Ordinary Time. We're in Ordinary Time. Oh, yeah. And then soon we'll be in Advent. Then after Advent, we'll be in Lent, Epiphany. Then we'll go to Lent, and we'll go to Easter, and we'll go to the season after Pentecost, which is Ordinary Time. We circle around the year, and that's our habit in the Episcopal Church. Because the way that we deal with time, I think, is really healthy, and a little commercial for the Episcopal Church right now. Because we deal with time by marking time with prayer and blessing. We deal with time by marking time with prayer and blessing and presence to one another. If you look in the Book of Common Prayer, which I have a whole shelf full of them in the sacristy, all our prayers are related to time. Birth, baptism, right? Confirmation, adolescence, marriage, blessing of a child, we have prayers for. Blessing at the time of death, we have prayers for. Funeral prayers. Prayers as if we put someone in the grave. Prayers for someone as they're grieving. And so, as we struggle with the same thing, I hope that we take Jesus' invitation, first of all, to let go and to recognize, well, not really up to me and in my control when the kingdom of God appears all the time. And you know when it does, hopefully I'll see it. And hopefully I'll know. Jesus says you will know. So let's have the heightened awareness that we can have. And let's also heighten that awareness by marking time as a community and as individuals through marinating our lives in prayer. Blessing one another when we can. Praying for one another constantly. And by being present to one another as we all move through time together in this circle of calendar that we have. Being present to one another, joyful and be joyful, sorrowful and sorrowful. Love one another in all, loving one another at all times. And knowing that God